Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she pushed her cleaning cart through the quiet hallways of Techfront Industries. The digital clock on the wall showed 11:30 p.m., and most of the office workers had long gone home to their families. But for Sarah, this was just another regular night shift, a job she had been doing faithfully for the past 7 years. At 54 years old, Sarah's hands showed the wear of years of hard work, but her eyes still held a gentle warmth that made even the security guards look forward to their brief conversations with her. Tonight, she hummed softly to herself as she cleaned, a habit she had developed to keep herself company during the lonely night hours. The building's maintenance staff knew Sarah as the woman who never complained, even when faced with the messiest situations. Her fellow janitor, Tom, often told her she worked too hard, but Sarah would just smile and say, "Every job deserves to be done well." What most people didn't know was that behind her humble position lay a story of sacrifice and determination. In her small locker in the basement break room, Sarah kept two precious photographs. The first showed her daughter Jenny, now in her third year of medical school, and the second was of her son Michael, studying engineering at the state university. These photos were her motivation on the toughest nights, reminding her why she chose this path. 7 years ago, when her husband David suddenly passed away from a heart attack, Sarah's world had turned upside down. With two teenagers about to enter college and mounting medical bills from David's final hospital stay, she needed a job that offered stable health insurance more than a prestigious title. Techfront Industries had offered both security and night shift hours that allowed her to take online bookkeeping jobs during the day. As Sarah moved through the executive floor with her vacuum cleaner, she paused briefly to straighten a crooked photo frame on the wall. It was these small details that mattered to her, not because anyone would notice, but because she took pride in her work. The marble floors reflected her image as she worked, showing a woman in a simple blue uniform, her black hair streaked with gray tied neatly in a practical bun. The night security guard, James, waved at her through the glass doors as he made his rounds. "Evening, Sarah. Left you some coffee in the break room," he called out. Sarah smiled and waved back. These small acts of kindness from her coworkers made the nights feel less lonely. What her coworkers appreciated most about Sarah was her willingness to help others. When Maria, another cleaning staff member, had needed time off to care for her sick child, Sarah had covered her shifts without hesitation. When the new janitor, Kyle, struggled to learn the cleaning routes, Sarah had stayed extra hours to help him master the schedule. Tonight, as she cleaned the conference rooms where important decisions were made daily, Sarah thought about her children's upcoming tuition payments. Jenny had called earlier that day, excited about her clinical rotations, while Michael had sent a photo of his latest engineering project. Their success made every hour of work worthwhile. In the quiet of the night, Sarah remembered how different her life had been before. She had worked as an accountant at a small firm, wearing business suits instead of a cleaner's uniform. But life had taught her that there was dignity in all honest work, and her children had learned valuable lessons about perseverance and humility from her example. As midnight approached, Sarah reached the lobby, her final area for the night. The massive glass windows reflected the city lights outside, and she could see her own reflection mixed with the glittering skyline. She didn't see someone doing menial work. She saw a mother who had found a way to give her children a future. The maintenance supervisor, Mr. Rodriguez, had once told her, "Sarah, you clean these offices like they're your own home." She had replied simply, "Everyone deserves to come to a clean workplace in the morning." This attitude had earned her respect among the night staff, even if the daytime employees rarely noticed her presence. As she finished her shift and prepared to head home, Sarah checked her phone. There was a message from Jenny. "Love you, Mom. Thanks for everything you do for us." These simple words brought a warm smile to her face as she gathered her belongings. Little did Sarah know that her life at Techfront Industries was about to change dramatically with the arrival of the new CEO. But for now, she was content, knowing that her work, though humble, was helping build a better future for her children. As she walked to the bus stop in the early morning hours, her head was held high, proud of another night's work well done. Marcus Sterling's arrival at Techfront Industries was marked by the roar of a Ferrari as it pulled into the CEO's reserved parking spot. At 45, he cut an imposing figure in his tailored Italian suit, his perfectly styled hair, and a watch that cost more than presence felt. "Ma." The executive floor buzzed with nervous energy as Sterling strode through the corridors. His reputation had preceded him. At his previous company, he had laid off 30% of the workforce within his first month, all while doubling executive bonuses. His management style was often described as ruthless efficiency, though former employees used less flattering terms. During his first company-wide meeting, Sterling stood at the podium, his cold gray eyes scanning the packed auditorium. "Changes are coming," he announced, his voice sharp and decisive. "TechFront has been too soft, too comfortable. We're not running a charity here." The maintenance staff, seated in the back rows, exchanged worried glances. Within his first week, Sterling had already begun implementing his aggressive cost-cutting measures. The free coffee in the break rooms disappeared. The maintenance staff's health insurance coverage was reduced. The annual Employee Appreciation Day was cancelled. Yet, mysteriously, a memo circulated announcing increased executive performance bonuses. Mr. Rodriguez, the maintenance supervisor, watched his team's morale plummet. When he tried to schedule a meeting with Sterling to discuss the cuts, the CEO's assistant informed him that Sterling was too busy to meet with janitorial staff. The message was clear: some employees were considered more valuable than others. Sterling's behavior in the office became notorious. He would deliberately leave coffee spills on his desk, saying it gave the cleaning staff something to do. During lunch meetings, he would scatter food crumbs across the conference room floor, smirking as he did so. His assistant went through 3 replacements in just 2 weeks, each one leaving in tears. The changes affected everyone, but the maintenance staff bore the brunt of it. Their breaks were shortened, their workload increased, and their complaints were ignored. When Tom, one of the janitors, requested time off for his daughter's graduation, Sterling's response was a curt email: "Maintenance staff should understand their priorities." During executive meetings, Sterling would boast about his cost-cutting achievements. "We've reduced operational expenses by 25%, he would announce, conveniently omitting that these savings came from cutting basic employee benefits. The board members nodded approvingly, focused only on the improving profit margins. Sarah Chen noticed the changes too. The friendly security guards now looked tense and worried about their jobs. The once cheerful break room became quiet and somber. Even the simple pleasure of having a cup of coffee during her break was gone. Sterling had ordered the coffee machines removed to reduce unnecessary expenses. One evening, Sterling worked late, unusual for him. He watched Sarah cleaning the executive floor with a critical eye. "You missed a spot," he called out, pointing to an already spotless corner. "This is why we pay you people so little. You can't even do your basic jobs properly." Sarah kept her dignity and quietly recleaned the area, while Sterling smirked and returned to his office. The stories about Sterling's behavior spread through the company like wildfire. There was the time he made an intern cry during a presentation, the day he fired a pregnant employee for taking too many bathroom breaks, and countless instances of him belittling maintenance staff in front of others. Despite the growing discontent, Sterling seemed untouchable. The company's stock price had risen since his appointment, and the board was pleased with the financial results. They either didn't know or didn't care about the human cost of these improvements. As the weeks passed, TechFront Industries transformed from a place where people had once been proud to work into a pressure cooker of stress and fear. The maintenance staff, once a cheerful group who took pride in their work, now moved through the building like shadows, trying to remain invisible to avoid Sterling's cruel attention. Even the executive floor changed. The friendly greetings and casual conversations disappeared, replaced by tense nods and hurried walks to avoid Sterling's notice. His assistant's desk became a revolving door of temporary workers, none lasting more than a few days under his demanding and demeaning management style. What Sterling failed to realize was that his behavior was being noticed, not just by the employees he tormented, but by others who would soon play a crucial role in his downfall. His worst display of arrogance was yet to come, an incident involving Sarah Chen that would finally expose his true nature to those who had the power to stop him. The morning that changed everything at TechFront Industries started with heavy rain. Dark clouds hung low over the city, and puddles of muddy water formed in the parking lot. It was 8:45 a.m., and Sarah Chen was finishing her morning cleaning of the lobby, having worked through the night as usual. Marcus Sterling's Ferrari screeched into his parking spot, splashing through several muddy puddles. He stepped out, wearing his expensive leather shoes, Italian-made ones that cost thousands of dollars. Instead of using the mat at the entrance, he deliberately walked through more puddles. leaving a trail of muddy footprints across the freshly cleaned lobby floor. Sarah watched quietly as he approached, her mop still in her hands. She had just finished making the marble floors shine, a task that had taken her nearly an hour. The mud-covered footprints formed a clear path of destruction across her work. What made this morning different was the presence of the board members. 5 distinguished-looking executives, including James Wilson, had arrived early for their quarterly meeting. They stood in the lobby, watching as Sterling approached with a malicious glint in his eyes. "You there, cleaning lady," Sterling called out loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "Look at my shoes. They're filthy." He planted himself firmly in front of Sarah, his muddy shoes leaving more marks on the floor. Sarah looked at him quietly, her hands tightening around her mop handle. The security guard at the front desk, who had always been kind to her, looked away uncomfortably. "Well?" Sterling's voice grew louder. "Aren't you going to clean them? That's what we pay you for, isn't it?" He lifted one foot expectantly, like a king waiting to be served. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, James Wilson, stepped forward slightly, his brow furrowed with concern. But before he could speak, Sterling continued his performance. "On your knees," Sterling commanded, pointing to the floor. "Clean my shoes properly. Show these gentlemen how we maintain high standards at every level of this company." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. 20 years ago, she had graduated with an MBA. 10 years ago, she had been an office manager. Now this man wanted her to kneel and clean his shoes in front of everyone. Slowly, Sarah knelt down. Her uniform, always kept clean and neat, touched the dirty floor. She took out her cleaning cloth, the same one she used to polish the brass fixtures in the building. "See, gentlemen," Sterling announced triumphantly. "This is how you maintain proper hierarchy in a company. Everyone should know their place." As Sarah began to clean his shoes, Sterling continued his cruel monologue. "You know, when I took over, these maintenance people had all sorts of benefits. Health insurance, paid breaks, vacation days. Ridiculous. They should be grateful they even have jobs." The lobby had grown deathly quiet. Even the usual morning bustle of arriving employees had stopped, as people stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Someone in the back had their phone out, recording everything. James Wilson's face had grown increasingly dark. He watched Sarah's hands, aged by years of hard work, carefully cleaning the expensive leather shoes. Something about her movements seemed familiar to him, triggering a memory he couldn't quite place. Sterling wasn't finished. "Look at how slow she is. This is why these people earn minimum wage. No efficiency, no skills, no." "That's enough." The words came from James Wilson, quiet but firm. Sterling turned, surprised by the interruption. "I'm sorry?" But before Wilson could respond, Sarah finished cleaning the shoes. She stood up slowly, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. Her eyes met Sterling's, not with anger or hatred, but with a calm that made him unexpectedly uncomfortable. "Your shoes are clean now, Mr. Sterling," she said softly, her voice steady. "Will there be anything else?" Something in her composure made Sterling step back slightly. He hadn't expected this reaction. No tears, no begging, no breakdown. Just quiet dignity. The gathered crowd began to disperse, but the damage was done. Phones had captured everything. Within hours, the video would begin its journey across social media, carrying with it the seeds of Sterling's downfall. As Sarah returned to her cleaning cart, James Wilson watched her closely. There was something about her face, her manner, that tugged at his memory. He had seen that same quiet dignity before, years ago, during a difficult time in his life. Sterling strode toward the elevators with his clean shoes, oblivious to the fact that his moment of cruelty had just set in motion events that would soon shock everyone at Techfront Industries. Behind him, Sarah quietly began to clean his muddy footprints from the lobby floor, just as she had done every morning, with the same care and attention she always showed. James Wilson sat in his office after the board meeting, unable to focus on the financial reports in front of him. The morning's events kept replaying in his mind, but there was something else bothering him. Something about the janitor's face that stirred old memories. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos, going back several years until he found what he was looking for. There, in a picture from his mother's last birthday, stood the same woman, Sarah Chen. Only then, she wasn't wearing a cleaner's uniform, but rather a nurse's aide outfit, and she was helping his mother blow out the candles. 5 years ago, when his mother was battling cancer, Sarah had been her private caregiver, working through an agency. Wilson remembered how she would come early and stay late, reading to his mother, making her laugh even on the worst days. His mother had often said, "That Sarah, she's got more education than most of us. Did you know she has an MBA?" The revelation hit him hard. He remembered conversations with Sarah during those difficult months. She had talked about her previous career in business, her 2 children, and her dreams for their future. Then her husband had gotten sick, and everything had changed. Wilson pressed the intercom button. "Janet, could you find out when Sarah Chen, from the cleaning staff, takes her break? And please clear my schedule for the next hour." At 2 p.m., he found Sarah in the basement break room, eating a simple lunch from a paper bag. When she saw him, she started to stand, but he gestured for her to stay seated. "Mrs. Chen," he said softly, "you took care of my mother, Margaret Wilson, during her final year." Sarah's eyes widened with recognition. "Mr. Wilson, yes, I remember. Your mother was a wonderful woman. She always told me about your success, how proud she was of you." Wilson sat down across from her, his expensive suit out of place in the modest break room. "Why didn't you say anything this morning?" Sarah carefully folded her sandwich wrapper. "It wasn't relevant, Mr. Wilson. I'm here to do my job, not to remind people of who I used to be." "You have an MBA," Wilson pressed. "You are a successful business manager. Why are you working as a janitor?" Sarah finished his sentence with a gentle smile. "Life doesn't always go as planned, Mr. Wilson. After my husband passed, I needed stable health insurance for my children more than I needed a title. This job provided that." Wilson listened as Sarah told him about her journey, how her husband's illness had drained their savings, how she'd taken the caregiving job to make ends meet, and finally, how she'd found this position at TechFront Industries. "My daughter Jenny is in medical school now," Sarah said proudly. "Michael is studying engineering. This job might not be prestigious, but it's helping my children achieve their dreams." As she spoke, Wilson thought about Sterling's behavior that morning, about all the cruel changes he'd implemented affecting the maintenance staff. He thought about his mother, who had always taught him that true character shows in how you treat those who can't fight back. "Mrs. Chen," he said finally, "would you be willing to share your story with the board?" Sarah hesitated. "Mr. Wilson, I appreciate your concern, but I can't risk losing this job. My children's education depends on it." "Trust me," Wilson assured her, his mind already forming a plan. "Sterling's behavior this morning wasn't just cruel, it was a liability to this company. But your story, your dedication, that's what TechFront Industries should really be about." As they talked, other pieces fell into place in Wilson's mind. He remembered more stories his mother had told him about Sarah, her intelligence, her dignity, her business acumen. He thought about how she'd managed her children's education while working multiple jobs, how she'd maintained her pride even when life had forced her to take steps backward. "The board needs to know what's really happening in this company," Wilson said finally. "Not just Sterling's abuse, but the incredible human potential he's wasting. People like you, Mrs. Chen, deserve better." Sarah looked at her hands, rough from years of cleaning. "Sometimes, Mr. Wilson, the most important thing isn't the job you do, but how you do it." Wilson stood up, straightening his tie. "That's exactly what the board needs to hear. And Sarah, my mother would be proud to see you still helping others, just in a different way." As he left the break room, Wilson's determination had solidified into a plan. Sterling's days of tyranny were numbered, but more importantly, Sarah Chen's story was about to become a catalyst for real change at TechFront Industries. The video of Sterling's cruel behavior spread across social media like wildfire. By lunchtime, it had been shared thousands of times, and by Emily Martinez, a junior employee who had recorded the incident on her phone, sat nervously at her desk. She hadn't expected her video to go viral, but something about Sarah's quiet dignity and Sterling's arrogance had compelled her to share it. Now her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The comments section under the video filled with outrage. Former employees of Sterling's previous companies began sharing their own stories. A woman named Rachel posted about being fired while 8 months pregnant. Another ex-employee, David, shared how Sterling had mocked his disability during a staff meeting. Each news story painted a darker picture of the CEO's character. In the company cafeteria, groups of employees huddled together, discussing the morning's events in hushed tones. Many shared their own experiences with Sterling's cruelty. Lisa from accounting revealed how he had made her work through her father's funeral. Mark from it described being berated in front of clients for a minor technical glitch. Sterling himself remained in his office, blinds drawn, as his assistant dealt with a flood of calls from reporters. Major news networks wanted statements. Business magazines requested interviews. Social media managers struggled to control the damage to the company's reputation as #BoycottTechFront started trending. By mid-afternoon, a different kind of story began emerging. An old colleague of Sarah's from her business management days recognized her in the video and shared her background story. Sarah Chen has an MBA and was a brilliant manager before personal tragedies struck. Now she works nights cleaning offices to put her kids through college. She's the real face of dignity and perseverance. The revelation about Sarah's education and background added a new dimension to the story. People weren't just angry about Sterling's behavior anymore, they were inspired by Sarah's resilience. Social media users began sharing their own stories of taking humble jobs to support their families, creating a movement about workplace dignity. HR departments at TechFront were overwhelmed with emails from employees finally speaking up about Sterling's past behavior. The maintenance staff, encouraged by the public support, submitted a detailed report of the benefit cuts and mistreatment they had endured under his leadership. As the day progressed, business partners began distancing themselves from TechFront. A major client suspended their contract pending investigation. The company's stock price started to drop. Investors called board members, expressing their concerns about Sterling's leadership and the potential damage to their investments. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her work quietly, unaware of the storm she had inadvertently sparked. When her son Michael called to tell her she was on the news, she simply said, "I have floors to clean, dear. We can talk about it later." By evening, investigative journalists had uncovered Sterling's history at previous companies. A pattern emerged: aggressive cost-cutting, employee abuse, and eventual company decline after his departure. One reporter found that 3 companies he had led had faced major lawsuits for hostile work environments. The company's public relations team worked overtime trying to manage the crisis. They drafted statement after statement, but each attempt to defend Sterling only seemed to make things worse. His past quotes about maintaining hierarchy and keeping the lower ranks in their place resurfaced, fueling public outrage. Security footage from other days began leaking, showing Sterling's repeated mistreatment of staff. A video of him throwing coffee at a cleaner's cart, another of him berating a pregnant receptionist for sitting down during her shift. Each new revelation added fuel to the fire. As night fell, #JusticeForSarah and #FireSterling were trending nationwide. Celebrity activists shared the video, calling for corporate accountability. Labor rights organizations offered to represent the maintenance staff. Legal firms reached out, offering to take cases against Sterling pro bono. In the quiet of the night shift, Sarah went about her usual routine, cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. But this time, security guards nodded respectfully as she passed. Office workers staying late stood up when she entered their rooms. Someone had left flowers on her cleaning cart with a note that read, "Thank you for showing us what real class looks like." The day ended with an emergency message to all board members, calling for an urgent meeting the next morning. The company's future hung in the balance, and James Wilson prepared to reveal everything he had learned about Sarah Chen. Sterling's reign of terror was about to face its final challenge. The emergency board meeting began at 7 a.m. sharp. The tension in the boardroom was thick as 12 board members sat around the polished mahogany table, their faces grave. Marcus Sterling sat at the head, his usual arrogant smile replaced by a tight-lipped scowl as he watched James Wilson arrange his papers. "Before we discuss the PR crisis," Wilson began, standing up, "there's something the board needs to know about Sarah Chen." He pulled out an old photograph and passed it around. The image showed Sarah in professional attire, accepting a business award from 10 years ago. Sarah Chen graduated with an MBA from State University in 2004, ranking 3rd in her class. Wilson continued. She was the financial controller at Anderson Manufacturing for 8 years, where she managed a team of 20 accountants. The board members exchanged surprised looks. Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But that's not how I know her, Wilson said, his voice softening. I know her as the woman who cared for my mother during her final battle with cancer. He pulled out another photo, this one showing Sarah helping his elderly mother in a garden. When my mother was dying, Sarah worked as her caregiver. She had taken the job after her husband's illness drained their savings. She would read to my mother, make her laugh, and bring dignity to her final days. My mother used to say that Sarah had the soul of an angel and the mind of a business genius. Sterling attempted to interrupt, but the board chairman silenced him with a raised hand. Sarah's husband passed away 5 years ago, Wilson continued. She had 2 teenage children about to enter college. She needed stable health insurance more than she needed a prestigious title. That's why she took the janitorial position at TechFront. He then played an audio recording from his phone, his mother's voice from years ago. That Sarah Chen, she could run this hospital better than the administrators. But instead, she sits here with an old woman, making my days brighter. That's real leadership, Jimmy. The boardroom fell silent. Even Sterling seemed to shrink in his chair. While Mr. Sterling has been cutting benefits and humiliating our maintenance staff, Wilson pressed on, Sarah has been working night shifts, taking online bookkeeping jobs during the day, all to put her children through college. Her daughter is now in medical school. Her son is studying engineering. He laid out more documents. Sarah's old performance reviews, her MBA transcript, letters of recommendation from her previous employers. The woman Mr. Sterling forced to clean his shoes has more education than some people in this room. She exemplifies everything our company claims to value: dedication, dignity, and determination. The board chairman removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Mr. Wilson, this is enlightening. But why didn't Mrs. Chen ever apply for a corporate position here? Because, Wilson explained, the night shift allows her to work other jobs during the day. The health insurance covers her children's medical needs. She chose her family's welfare over her career ambitions. And how did we repay that dedication? By letting our CEO humiliate her in front of everyone. Sterling finally spoke up, his voice defensive. This is irrelevant. The company's profits have increased under my leadership. Who cares about one janitor's story? The board chairman's face hardened. We care, Mr. Sterling. This company was built on values of respect and integrity. Values you seem to have forgotten. Wilson wasn't finished. He presented screenshots of employee complaints, documentation of Sterling's benefit cuts, and statistics showing increased staff turnover under his leadership. We're not just losing money on constant retraining, he explained. We're losing our soul as a company. The board members passed the documents around, their expressions growing darker with each page. The chairman called for a brief recess, during which the board members huddled in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers. When they reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The chairman looked directly at Sterling, who had begun to sweat visibly. Mr. Sterling, we need to discuss your position with this company. Wilson gathered his papers, knowing his work was done. As he left the boardroom, he passed Sarah in the hallway, quietly cleaning windows. She gave him a small nod, unaware that upstairs, decisions were being made that would change her life. The board meeting would continue for several more hours, but its direction was clear. Sterling's time at TechFront was coming to an end, and a new chapter was about to begin, one that would recognize the true value of employees like Sarah Chen. Marcus Sterling's final day at TechFront Industries lasted exactly 45 minutes. The board's decision had been unanimous: immediate termination with no severance package. Security watched as he packed his designer items into a cardboard box, his face red with rage and humiliation. As Sterling walked through the lobby for the last time, he passed Sarah, who was polishing the brass handrails. Their eyes met briefly, but Sarah simply continued her work, showing the same quiet dignity she had displayed throughout their encounters. Sterling hurried past, his expensive shoes, the ones she had been forced to clean, clicking against the marble floor for the last time. Meanwhile, up in the boardroom, a different kind of meeting was taking place. James Wilson sat with Sarah, who still wore her cleaning uniform, as the board chairman explained their decision. Mrs. Chen, the chairman began, we would like to offer you a position in our corporate social responsibility department. He slid a contract across the table. Your experience, both in business and, well, in life, makes you uniquely qualified to help us rebuild our company culture. Sarah stared at the document, her hands folded carefully in her lap. What exactly would this role involve? She asked quietly. You would lead our new employee advocacy program, Wilson explained. Help us create policies that protect all workers, especially our service staff. Your MBA and your experiences on both sides of the corporate ladder make you perfect for this role. The salary figure on the contract made Sarah's eyes widen slightly. It was more than 5 times her current wages. But she hesitated. My children's health insurance. Full coverage for your entire family, the chairman assured her. Better than what executives currently receive. And flexible hours so you can attend your children's important events. As the details were explained, tears formed in Sarah's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. I accept, she said simply, on one condition. The board members leaned forward, curious. The entire maintenance staff gets their benefits restored, with improvements. And I want a scholarship program established for employees' children. Wilson smiled. This was the Sarah his mother had described, always thinking of others first. The chairman nodded without hesitation. Consider it done. We'll need your help designing these programs anyway. News of the changes spread quickly through the building. The maintenance staff gathered in their break room, celebrating as Sarah shared the news about the restored benefits. Tom, her fellow janitor, hugged her with tears in his eyes. You did it, Sarah. You really did it. But Sarah wasn't finished. She spent the afternoon making phone calls to former employees who had been unfairly dismissed under Sterling's leadership. Many were offered their jobs back, with apologies and improved conditions. By evening, Sarah finally called her children. Mom, you're all over the news, Jenny exclaimed. They're calling you the guardian angel of corporate reform. Michael chimed in on the three-way call. I saw the video, Mom. You were so brave. I've never been prouder to be your son. Sarah smiled, looking around her new office, the same one where Sterling had once sat. The view of the city was beautiful, but she found herself missing the quiet of the night shift, the simple satisfaction of making things clean and orderly. As she prepared to leave for the day, she stopped by the maintenance break room one last time. Her old locker was still there, with the photos of her children taped inside. She decided to leave them there, a reminder of where she had come from. The night crew was arriving as she left. They stopped and stared, unsure how to act around their former colleague who was now an executive. But Sarah smiled warmly and helped one of them adjust their cleaning cart. The wheels stick sometimes, she explained. You have to turn it just so. In the lobby, she passed the spot where just days ago, Sterling had humiliated her. Now, a new sign hung on the wall. Every role has dignity. Every person deserves respect. It was the first change she had implemented in her new position. As Sarah walked to her car, no longer needing to take the late-night bus, she remembered something her late husband had once told her. Life's not about how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up. She had gotten back up, and now she was going to help others do the same. The sun was setting over Techfront Industries, casting long shadows across the parking lot. But inside, a new day was just beginning. 1 year after Sterling's departure, Techfront Industries had transformed into a very different company. Sarah Chen's office, once Sterling's domain of fear, had become a place of hope and change. On her wall hung a simple framed photo of her in her cleaning uniform, a reminder of where her journey had begun. Sarah's Every Level Matters program had become a model for other companies. Under her leadership, Techfront introduced revolutionary policies: full college scholarships for employees' children, comprehensive health coverage for all staff regardless of position, and a clear path for career advancement from entry-level positions to management roles. The maintenance break room, once a dim and forgotten space, was now bright and welcoming. Coffee machines, better than the ones Sterling had removed, hummed constantly. A wall of photos showcased employee achievements: graduations, certifications, promotions. In the center was a picture of Sarah's daughter Jenny in her white medical coat and her son Michael at his engineering graduation. Mrs. Chen, her assistant, called from the doorway. The new employees are here for orientation. Sarah walked to the company auditorium, the same place where Sterling had once announced his cruel cuts. Now, twice a month, she personally welcomed new employees. Today, 50 people sat waiting, a mix of executives and maintenance staff, all treated with equal importance. "Welcome to TechFront," Sarah began, her voice warm but firm. "I want to tell you a story about dignity." She shared her journey, watching eyes widen as she described her path from MBA graduate to janitor to corporate leader. "At TechFront, we believe every role is crucial, every person valuable." The company's success proved her philosophy right. Employee turnover had dropped by 80%. Productivity had increased. The stock price had reached new highs. Business magazines wrote about the TechFront model of employee empowerment. Other companies sent representatives to learn from their example. In the hallways, executives and maintenance staff greeted each other by name. The old hierarchy had been replaced by mutual respect. Sarah had made sure that every employee, from the CEO to the night janitors, spent one day each quarter working in a different department. Managers cleaned floors, janitors sat in on board meetings. Everyone learned to value each other's contributions. Sarah's children visited often. Jenny, now a resident physician, volunteered at the company's free health clinic for employees. Michael, working as an engineer, helped design better equipment for the maintenance staff. They were living proof that opportunities could change lives. The scholarship program, named in honor of James Wilson's mother, had already sent 30 employees' children to college. Wilson himself had become Sarah's strongest ally on the board. Together they continued pushing for more progressive policies. One evening, as Sarah worked late, she heard the familiar sound of cleaning carts in the hallway. She stepped out to find Maria, one of the night shift cleaners, carefully polishing the brass nameplates on the office doors. "How is your son's college application going?" Sarah asked, remembering their conversation from last week. Maria beamed. "He got accepted. The scholarship committee approved his application this morning. I never thought my son could go to university, but now..." She wiped happy tears from her eyes. Sarah helped her finish polishing the nameplates, ignoring Maria's protests that an executive shouldn't be doing this. "I'll never be too important to clean," Sarah said with a smile. "It reminds me that every job matters." As she finally left for home that night, Sarah passed the lobby where her story had changed so dramatically. The security guard, the same one who had witnessed her humiliation, tipped his hat respectfully. "Good night, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for everything." Outside, the lights of TechFront Industries glowed warmly against the night sky. Sarah remembered the dark days of working night shifts, worried about her children's future. Now, she was helping others find their path out of similar struggles. A passing janitor pushed his cart, whistling happily. On his uniform was the new company logo and the words "Every role has dignity," a daily reminder of how much had changed. Sarah watched him work for a moment, then turned toward her car, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to make a difference in someone's life. The story of the humiliated janitor had become a legend of transformation, not just for Sarah Chen, but for an entire company and all the lives it touched. TechFront Industries stood as proof that success and humanity could go hand in hand, that dignity could triumph over arrogance, and that sometimes the most powerful changes start with a simple act of courage.